I'm ditching eBird. That's right, today I am trading in eBird and a phone checklist for this. We are birding via notebook today. It's gonna be an interesting one. Let's go and do this. Now you might be wondering, Hawken, why the heck are you doing this? And you're right to question that. I've mentioned on the channel many times before that I love eBird. It's a phenomenal platform that you can record your own life list and data about all your own sightings while still contributing to citizen science.
And I asked my friends their opinions and they agreed as well.
I think eBird is an awesome platform. I think it has a ton of great features and it gets a lot of people out to see the birds.
You know, I think eBird's a great resource. It's certainly a nice way to find birds.
Let's see, what do I think about eBird? I think that it's really good. It's a really awesome way to just keep track of sightings, and also, at least for me, the community science side of it I think is fantastic.
So then why the heck am I doing this? Well, I have two reasons.
eBird was released in 2002, and birding did not start in 2002. There have been people birding for hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. And so I'm gonna go back to the pre-eBird era, or PE, BE, kind of like BC, but BE. And I'm gonna bird the way my grandparents intended me to. I'm gonna become a pure birder, not using any of this technology junk. The other thing I'm hoping to learn is see if I recognize anything about myself with this experiment. I might have picked up habits as a birder, relying on eBird to do a lot of the stuff for me. Or I might have picked up maybe some bad behaviors. 60 Canada Geese's flag. Let's bump that down so I don't have to put it in the description. So it should be a pretty interesting day. We're gonna see what my experience is like. I'm gonna share some thoughts along the way and then do a whole conclusion at the end on how I feel about switching away from eBird to notebook birding. We're here at Willard Bay State Park. You can see the bay behind me. I have my friends Caleb, Jordan, and Peter along with me. Their links, of course, will be in the description. It's gonna be an awesome day of birding here in northern Utah while trying out something new. So without further ado, let's do this. So a quick mention about how I'm gonna structure my checklist. I still wanna record some metadata so I can keep track of when these sightings happened. Location, of course, we're gonna be in Willard Bay, so let me fill that in really quick. Willard Bay State Park. Time of starting birding is 7:27 a.m. and then I'm gonna record all of my birds here. So this is as simple as it gets, just time start, location, the date up top, which I messed up, thank you Jordan, and I'm gonna be writing the birds I see, and I will fill this in as we come across them.
And so we got to work exploring the campground at the north part of Willard Bay State Park. And slowly, my list started to grow, and I filled in the birds by hand in the notebook. Even in this low, early morning light, we were still getting a good amount of species, and we were quickly amassing a pretty respectable list. There were a lot of birds active at the state park, which is really exciting. It's always fun when you get a great variety while out birding. When you're birding via notebook, however, a variety means you have to write down a lot of things, and I did feel like I was being slowed down a little bit, and I was constantly pulling my notebook out and putting it back in my pocket. Still though, notebook or eBird checklist, it's super exciting once that sun comes up over the horizon and you're getting a great look at a lot of birds. No medium of checklist is going to take away from that, that's for sure. I really loved watching these American goldfinch forage amongst all of the plants around the area. We had some wonderful sparrows too, including a pretty rare white-throated sparrow that you'll see in a second. At least rare for Utah, not rare in the US. But we don't generally get them here, so that was a very welcome addition to the start of our morning. Just look at that beauty, crisp white throat with the yellow headlights, as some people say, or eyebrows, as someone might describe it. It's mornings like these that really just make you love birding. A diverse set of species and some really great sunrise light. It doesn't get better than that.
All right, we're just wrapping up at the first spot here. We're gonna drive around Willard Bay to go see if we can find some other birds, but just some general thoughts so far. It's working relatively well. I'm definitely not easier than using my phone, I would say, because now I have to use a hand to hold this and a hand to hold the pen instead of I can just one hand eBird, usually on my phone. But I don't know, it's different. I'm enjoying it so far, writing down all of my birding lists and actually flipping through something physical. I'm probably writing down things less and just trying to remember them and then catching up after a certain period of time. But we'll see what other things I uncover along the way. Let's move to our next spot.
As my first experience started to sink in, I was starting to realize maybe it wasn't notebook versus eBird that I should be considering, and instead maybe it's the actual act of making a checklist that could be a detriment from the birding experience.
I think making checklists sometimes means that I miss some birds for sure. And that's typically because, sometimes I'm looking down at my phone and trying to make sure I keep count of the species that I'm seeing, or even with Merlin, which is kind of eBird adjacent, sometimes I'm looking up, species reported in the area and bar charts and stuff. So I think sometimes it does disconnect me from nature.
I also think that eBird's kind of a pain sometimes, especially if you're just out trying to enjoy stuff. I think it gets in the way sometimes. You're always constantly looking at your phone.
So as we reached our next location at the south end of Willard Bay State Park, I was filming some segments for this video and I actually quickly fell behind Caleb, Peter, and Jordan. They were setting out to try and find loons and they really wanted to see something incredibly cool while I was really focused on my notebook, and I found this was the spot that I was much slower than them by far compared to any other spot. And it might have been because I was also filming stuff for the video for sure, but it did give me some chances to reflect, and as I walked pretty far behind them, not worrying about keeping up to speed, I took in my surroundings. I enjoyed every single bird around me, and I wrote them each in my notebook. And for some reason, having this physical thing that I was holding and writing down stuff in made me a lot more intentional. And I appreciated all of these really cool species, even something like the European starling, widely considered by many to be a not great bird or a trash bird in some cases. I was watching really closely with admiration, watching these huge flocks move around and exhibit different behaviors. And while I was out in the field, I was starting to recognize this feeling. In fact, I actually did call it out in a segment that I filmed, sharing a bit of the pros and cons that I was noticing.
This definitely slows me down. If you're wanting to bird quickly and move and knock down every bird quickly, having to use a notebook and write in two hands opposed to just typing on a phone, I find is much slower for me. Not necessarily a bad thing. You might enjoy the slower paced birding and just want to take some notes about your surrounding area and just really be present in the moment. And I think this could actually help ground you a little bit more. I do feel more present and not as into my phone screen, even though I might be requiring more attention to actually write something out. I'm still noticing what's around me, and I kind of really like this. It's fun to have this little notebook to write things about what's happening.
So maybe eBird or a notebook isn't the problem, maybe it's the approach to how we bird. So kind of surprising me, I was enjoying the day. This was actually a pretty fun experiment thus far. Although birding with a notebook is not a novel experience. Like I mentioned, people have done this for a long time. In fact, unbeknownst to me, some of my friends had done it too.
I have. I've recorded my sightings in a notebook a couple of times, especially when I was starting. I did. Especially when I was starting, I was writing things down, and then eventually I'd get home and enter checklists.
Funnily enough, with notebooks and recording sightings when I was a kid, I actually used to record my sightings in notebooks. Although I would list things like long-necked stork species and then red-head duck, which obviously is a species but wasn't the one that I meant. But yeah, I used to list out species in a notebook, and I thought it was really, really cool to have a list. So
Eventually, I did catch up to my friends, and we started scoping and scanning the reservoir a little bit closer to see if we could find any of those scoters or loons they were hoping to see. And I'll go to that point a little deeper, that I was just having a great time and so focused on my notebook that I honestly didn't care that we were seeing a loon, whereas I could tell they were hoping for more out of this day. They had certain targets they wanted to see, and I felt as if my experience was starting to diverge from theirs slightly. If I didn't hit that target Pacific loon, that was okay, and I was just having a wonderful time just birding. And maybe I was getting more pure. If you're considering trying notebook birding, I will throw in one quick tip for you that you might find helpful.
One thing that was really helpful, I've learned the 4-letter abbreviation codes for birds. I think they're called banding codes actually, that allows you to quickly note down birds instead of writing out their full names. If you were to do an approach like this, that would be immensely helpful. All right, we're at location number 3 now, Manawa Reservoir. Honestly, it looks like Mantua. Jordan had to tell me how it was pronounced, but this will probably be the last location of the video.
Manaway.
What?
Manaway.
Manaway?
Yeah.
Manaway Reservoir, not Manawa or Mantua, even though it looks like it's spelt Mantua, but got my checklist here started. We got my first bufflehead of the year just on the list, which is pretty sweet. So got that one down. There's a bunch of other birds out here. We're still hoping to see some loons and scoters, and I'm gonna continue to run my notebook checklist.
And so we got started at the very last location of the day, but before I dive too deep into this experience in particular, let me share with you the gear that I was using. So I was using a Field Notes notebook very intentionally because it is super small. I can still write on it just like any other notebook, and it worked well for that, but it can fit into my pocket, and it wasn't such a pain to pull out of a backpack or anything like that. And then I was just using a pen. I think this is a Zebra branded one, but your favorite pen will work. So just use whatever you like to write with. This was definitely the easiest spot for me to bird with a notebook because we largely stood still while scoping across the whole reservoir, seeing what different duck and grebe species we could find, and hopefully picking up some loons along the way. So I never fell behind the group here because the group wasn't moving. And I still felt though I was very, very intentional about what I was putting into my notebook, what I was observing, kind of shifting back and forth between the two without much worry. And this was the most enjoyable. I had a lot of fun at this spot for sure. And to bring this video full circle, let me just kind of recap the overall experience into a few short points. eBird's incredible, and ultimately I'm not going to fully switch away from it. The features like tracking your GPS location and recording the time you spent birding and the amount of mileage you covered automatically for you is just simply too good. It's also way easier to write and record species. There's just such an ease of use of the product. It's so well designed. However, that ease of use can sometimes get in the way of our experience with birding, and I really discovered this about myself here today while using a notebook. I felt a little bit more grounded, and even though the notebook experience is slower, it made me stop a second. That extra point of friction had me thinking more about what I was looking at, and I wasn't moving from species to species. I certainly felt a lot more in the moment, mindful and present and appreciative of every single bird, and not just the best birds, not just the next bird to add to my list.
Final question, do you think I'm ridiculous for this experiment?
I don't think you're ridiculous for trying the notebook experiment. I think it's a good just like callback to the past, and I also think it's just a good example of how you can slow bird. I think it'd be really cool for people to sometimes take a notebook out in the field, and even just jotting down notes about a species I think would make for a closer experience with the birds, like jotting down notes about behavior and stuff, and then later taking your notebook home and importing that into eBird after the fact. I think it'd be cool. I think everyone should try it at least once.
Am I better than you all for using a notebook today?
You know, I don't know if you're better or not, but I mean, it seems like you're more mindful of what you're writing down.
And although I'm not switching away from eBird fully, I think I learned a lot today, and I'm going to take these things to heart. So I hope you appreciated coming along with me on this little experiment of notebook birding. Let me know any of the thoughts you had about today in the comments, or if you've ever birded with a notebook, or missed those days when everyone birded with a notebook. But thank you, as always, for watching my videos. I will see you in the next one. Happy birding.